enough.
This time I'll call to order the special work session of the Clearwater City Council for August 14th, 2024. Before we begin today, I just wanted to remind us that today is the anniversary of the passing of our former city manager, Bill Horn. Bill was not just a tremendous leader for our community, but he was beloved in this community. So many things that I walk past every day, throughout the city, not just city government property, but parks properties, businesses, all that Bill Horn had his hand in for the many years that he served this city with outstanding professionalism and work. So, and we all know Bill was perhaps the grandest gentleman that any of us have ever knew. He was truly a grand gentleman. So with that, I would just like to ask us to take just a moment of silence in remembrance of our former city manager, Bill Horn. Thank you. This time we'll move to item 2.1 on the agenda, fiscal year 2025 proposed budget recap and staffing update.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Kayleen Castle, Budget Director. We presented the proposed budget to you at the council meeting in July, and now that you've had some time to review, the purpose of this meeting is to give you time for questions and discussion with all departments represented. First, we have a few topics that were requested that we'll present to you, and then the remainder of our time will just be for your open discussion and questions for staff. If you have any questions on the presentation that I presented in July, I have that full presentation. We could pull it up and refer to any slides if you have questions about that. But first, a quick refresher, I just have 2 slides to go over showing the budget totals and just a recap of FTEs. This slide shows the total fiscal year 24-25 proposed budget by fund type. These categories are broken out in the proposed budget, and they were also broken out in the July presentation. The expenditure budget for all city operating funds, special revenue funds, and capital improvement funds is $753,521,697. In total, this reflects a 1% increase from the 23-24 amended total city budget. And I want to highlight real quick a change that is represented in this slide versus the one that was presented in July. In the last few weeks, I've been working on a lot of documentation for the final hearings and for trim compliance, and I found an error in public utilities in their transfers to capital. There were 2 projects that I didn't include in the operating side transferred to capital for public works projects for the Fort Harrison improvements and the public works complex. This totals $7,811,880 for the public utilities portion of those projects. So that correct amount, it's higher, is included in this total in utility funds. Since these projects were planned they were planned to be funded, they were included in the capital side. This doesn't affect the utility rates or any fund forecast that you've already seen. It's just an error on our part and the transfer out. The proposed budget includes total of 1,904.3 full-time equivalent positions across all funds for fiscal year 25. This is an increase of 17.6 FTEs from the fiscal year 24 amended budget. In this graph, the sand-colored portion represents general fund FTEs budgeted at 1,174.1 positions for fiscal year 25. This is an increase of 6.3 positions from the current year. And the green portion represents all other funds budgeted at 730.2 FTEs, and that is an increase of 11.3. Position changes in the general fund include in the police department, an addition of 1.8 FTEs for part-time positions to support the police aid program, and additional part-time hours are added to the red light camera program. These additions net 2 FTEs total. In public works, we are including 2 engineers to support our project workload and 1 business system analyst to support the new asset management software implementation. In human resources, we're adding an additional human resources analyst. This is added to support the increased volume of employee interactions. And we were also adding hours to convert a part-time to a full-time human resources technician. These increases are 1.3, an increase of 1.3 positions in human resources. In the Water and Sewer Fund for Public Utilities, we are adding 2 business systems analysts to support the new asset management software and other utility software, a warehouse supervisor to provide additional oversight for materials and inventory management, and a contracts and procurement specialist to support the utilities engineering team. In the Stormwater Fund for Public Works, we're adding a construction inspector to enhance right-of-way and sediment control inspections. In the General Services Fund for Building and Maintenance, 2 additional trades workers are added. In the Garage Fund, 2 fleet mechanics are added, and those mechanics will be supporting the solid waste team. In the Administrative Services Fund for Information Technology, a staff assistant is added to provide administrative support for the department, and a Network Analyst 3 is added to enhance identity management functions. And finally, in the special program, a part-time recreation leader is added to support youth and after-school programs at the North Greenwood Recreation Center, and this position is funded by revenues from the Juvenile Welfare Board. Staff has also prepared a staffing update, which is a follow-up to last year's presentation, so I'm going to turn it over to our HR Director, Tiffany Macris.
Morning, Mayor, Council, Tiffany Macris, Human Resources Director. So diving right in, I want to start off with some great news and hopefully carry this through the entire presentation. So the slide before you represents the metrics for permanent employees. So all the data for this slide and the rest of the presentation will include for permanent employee positions only. So I'm very happy to report that our vacancy rate is down. We have trended down to 7.7, and this is as of August 1st. Now, if we take into account the filled positions that are just awaiting their start date, we can drive that down further to 6.1%. So as of today, we have 139 vacant positions, and that is compared to 172 at this time last year. In our next slide, we are looking at the 5 years of the turnover rates. And so the turnover rate represents the number of voluntary resignations relative to the number of employees. So again, happy to report a downward trend in this category. So the totals that you're looking at for 2024 represent the actuals through the midpoint of the calendar year, so through June 30th, and then we've projected through the end of the calendar year through December. Again, we are trending favorably over the last 2 years and are happy to forecast that it looks as though we're going to drop back down to a single-digit turnover rate for the first time since 2020. This next slide is again a 5-year look at our resignations, retirements, and terminations. So this is including voluntary as well as involuntary terminations, retirements, employee death. So what we are seeing is that the voluntary resignations are down 43% from calendar 2023, and then we're holding steady at the other. We are projecting about a total of 220 separations for 2024, which is again a decrease from last year. We're looking at about a 20% decrease. So the vacancy reasons that have been provided by those who've left are shown here, with resignation at 57% being the highest. And then a breakdown of that 57%, the reasons that are provided are broken into new job, not indicated, which those tend to represent the highest amount of the information provided at the 2 largest portions of that pie. But we also have some dissatisfaction, relocation, scheduling, personal reasons. But one metric I think is really worth noting is that although this is a 2-year look back, the 9% of reasons provided had to do with pay. I want to show you, or I want to explain that this year for calendar 2024, we've had 2 resignations that have cited higher wages or leaving due to pay, which is tremendous. And so that's about a 70% decrease of that being a reason for 2023. So this graph represents the number of new hires and promotions. So what we're seeing is a downward trend in the number of new hires for 2024, and that can be attributed to fewer separations, higher retention. So what have we done to attract and retain employees? And I can stand here and say it's easy for me to present all the good information because I just happened to hit the sweet spot in the timeline to say a lot of hard work was done prior to my arrival. So I certainly want to give credit where credit is due. But there was a big heavy lift to pull off a formal classification and compensation study. And I was just fortunate enough to sit in the seat when it got to be implemented. But we saw a lot of success from that, and that went into effect the payroll period beginning December 30th, 2023. I'm going to get into a lot more on the next slide in regard to that. But some other things that have happened is we've expanded the remote work and telecommuting. Goodness gracious, sorry. And that's something that's being offered to our FLSA exempt employees. So our SAMP employees have the ability to work from home 1 day a week. We've increased the usage of the alternate schedules for the 410s. This Executive Leadership Academy is something that we are especially excited about. We just kicked that off in June. This is a 12-month program that has a customized curriculum to develop Clearwater future leaders and Clearwater executives. And so we're really excited with this inaugural group to be completing the program. The supervisory training is an area that we've had identified as needing some additional resources. So currently the training and engagement team in HR is putting together a learning path to address those, and we're going to aim that at new supervisors, but also open it up to supervisors who could use some refreshers on some soft skills and policy topics. And I don't want to say last, but certainly not least, we've got this new learning management system that we've just recently did a soft rollout, and we've got some training that's going to be available coming to all staff in the very near future. But this My Clearwater Learn is an online portal, and it's integrated with LinkedIn Learning, and we now have access to tens of thousands of different training courses and content, and are very excited to be able to offer this to our staff. So to do a little bit of a deeper dive on this classification and compensation study, this is something that we have adjusted our market position as a city to be a premier employer and are now within the 75th percentile of our pay grades and what our salary offerings are. Each pay grade was placed at a 5% difference from one step to the next, and it ranges 60% from the minimum to the maximum. This is a hybrid approach that was used for this particular study, meaning that both the time in position and total time with the city was taken into account. There was a $20,000 cap on the salary adjustments, and every permanent employee, non-bargaining, CWA and SAMP received a 1.5% pay increase. The study did not include FOP or IAFF hazardous pay because we are currently in open negotiations with them. And with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to field them.
Vice Mayor?
Okay, on that last slide that you had, it said permanent employees received at least 1.5. Is that the COLA? Because COLA's at 3.2. Is that in addition?
It was in addition, yes, sir.
Okay.
So if the position would not have otherwise received anything as a result of the market study or the adjustment, there was a 1.5% provided.
Okay, because of the adjusted market position.
Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions? City Manager, you have something to add?
Do you have, if I may, I just wanted to, whereas I appreciate Tiffany saying that she was able to walk into this, but the HR department and through our leadership team have really come up with a lot of ideas and programming that are working towards making us that premier employer. It's something, as the mayor and I are going around to the different departments and talking to our employees, that's a goal that we are really working towards, and I think that these numbers in terms of showing the reduction in our turnover are indicating that we are making progress for our staff to show that they are appreciated and that we are working to be that premier employer that retains premier employees. Always there's work to be done, and we will continue to do that work. But I just wanted to applaud not only the HR department, but all the teams and our leadership that have come up with those ideas to make us, really work towards being that premier employer.
Councilmember Teixeira.
So since I've been elected, staffing has always been one of our priorities and our challenges. And so to have these hard numbers 24 months later, I'm very impressed from, the significant decrease in vacancies, decrease in turnovers, resignations, as well as the reason not being paid. So kudos to having, the staff really and leadership addressing this challenge, because we can't run the city without staff, without good staff and happy staff. But one of the things that I'm very excited about is the Executive Leadership Academy. I do believe in promoting from within and investing in our employees. So that is something I'm very excited about, to see the first product that comes from that program. So kudos to you.
Likewise, thank you.
Any others? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ready for 2.2?
Actually, no, council members. Part of this item is the discussion regarding the nonprofit charitable sponsorships. So just as a recap in terms of what has happened historically, Clearwater Gas used to provide sponsorships then back in 2002 in response to council concern regarding the use of those revenues towards sponsorships. The staff was directed to remove some of the items outside of the gas sponsorship and limit those revenues that they used solely for that purpose. And then in January of this year, council directed staff to issue a letter of interest to nonprofits and charitable organizations in the community in an effort to be more transparent and provide a little bit more of a competitive process towards these sponsorships or to sponsor events and activities that are being held locally. And so, working with public communications, we issued a press release, we created a webpage, and we also posted on the social medias of the city's accounts, as well as neighborhood services. They issued and shared the opportunity with the local nonprofit partners that they have in their database. And so based on council direction, the nonprofits had to be 501c3, so charitable organizations. They had to identify in their letter of interest the amounts, the activity, and how that aligns with the strategic plan, with the city's strategic plan in 3 different areas. So it's either going to be community well-being, economic and housing opportunity, or environmental stewardship. Staff received 47 letters of interest. Of those that we received, we actually started eliminating those individuals that actually met the criteria. And so of those 47, we have 11 that have fully met the criteria that was established by council back in January. And as you can see, they range from 1,000 to 5,000, with the exception of the Friends of Moccasin Lake. And the reason being is that they intend to donate it to the city, so it becomes city property anyway. So what we are asking now is council direction in terms of the proposed award, and if council wishes to move forward with the recommended awards as listed. And they were part of the agenda item, but I can go over line by line if you wish. And then there's a second request after that.
Vice Mayor?
Okay, so I went over the list, and there were some ones. Well, first of all, let me ask you, when was the letter of, when was that due? Was there a due date on that?
Yes, so they were due April 30th.
April 30th.
And so the intent originally was, staff was trying to schedule a budget workshop in May. So that was the intent. Unfortunately, that did not work out, so it's today. But so it was out on the web, and it was shared with our partners.
Well, there were several, I didn't have a problem with the list of the ones that were picked, but there were several on the vendors that were supported before that aren't. And my question is, maybe there's other monies that maybe they applied for. One is Hope Villages, I think is really important.
They were provided the opportunity. Why they did not submit a request, I do not know. It could very well be that they were used to a different process and did not submit, but they did share. Hope Villages, Chi-Chi Foundation, and Pinellas County Education Foundation did receive the opportunity, but did not submit a request.
So what was our process before this was put in?
It depends on what year, and I don't mean that facetiously by any means whatsoever, but as Rosemary has indicated, the process has changed. So as of last year, and for the 2 years prior to that, council, we separated the list. So it was all in the gas department, and we do have our gas director here to explain that. Then when council changed it to where not everything was going to be funded out of the gas, they created another list. And so the second list was what council activities they would sponsor out of their budgets, not out of the gas sponsorship budget. And that is where the prior list has come from. And so for the last 3 years, I believe, we have just continued to fund that list without a process, other than the budget process, of which council said, yes, we want to continue to fund those. This year is where the process became vastly different in terms of having this letter of interest process. I'm sure that Brian can explain how gas had done it prior to that, if you would like.
Yes, Brian Langgill, Executive Director for Clearwater Gas System. So yes, historically, we took care of all the sponsorships for many, many years. And a couple years ago, as you all know, there was an article written in the Times about about how much money we were spending on sponsorships, and was that a good use of utility money, ratepayer money to do that at that point? And so in 2022, we came up with a list that we felt we could, could defend, support, that showed that, we were, sponsoring entities that had our brand recognition, that we were visible out in the community. We're sponsoring charitable organizations, our key customers, and entities like that. Whereas some of these other ones were more of a request for us to sponsor them because it was easy. It was just easier for gas to do it, and then also to fund it as well. So we have our list now. As the city manager just said, we've been working off that list since late 2022. I have a revised list for gas sponsorships that I'm going to bring forward to the city manager for approval. And I could certainly hand that out to you all as well, so you can see that. But we have a budgeted amount of $257,000 for this coming fiscal year. Last year, currently this year, we're at $224,000, right around there. But we've been a little under that in spending. We haven't met that up to 100% of that budgeted amount. But we do plan on getting a little more aggressive on that, and sponsoring things where we are. Having that brand recognition, where we are out in the community, and like Clearwater for Youth, the scholarships and things like that. We want to be out there doing those kind of things moving forward.
Well, personally, other than, I think the Times article was that compared what we were spending compared to other utilities on sponsorships. And for me, it had nothing to do with the process. The process was transparent, and the community knows we're out there. It had to do maybe the proportion that the gas company was giving. And so all this, I think, needs to be coordinated with what they're doing. That's the way we've always done it. I mean, it's a municipally owned gas company that is market competitive. They're out there trying, convincing folks, which utility to use and appliances and other things you do to tie your hands by limiting, your sponsorships in this way. Again, it needs to be transparent. Everybody knows what you're doing and how much you're spending. It needs to be proportionate. But I don't agree with all this process. I think it's putting us in a bad spot. We've even had challenging conversations, city manager, with, we get requests for buying a table at a charitable dinner function, that just, these things come up throughout the year, and it's not really, doesn't lend itself well to this kind of rigid process for evaluating them. And it's very important for not just Clearwater Gas, but the city to be involved out there in the community at these events, talking with residents and citizens. And that's what most of this sponsorship money goes to, those opportunities to engage the council and the city staff with the community. So I hate to see all the work that's been done to get us to this point, but, and 4 of you may agree or disagree, but I think this process is just way too rigid, and I think it needs to be coordinated with what Clearwater Gas is doing to make sure that we're all working together, and we want to treat everybody fairly. We don't want to be passing out money just because we're friends or whatever. I had lunch with 2 mayors of large cities in Tampa Bay yesterday. They do not have this kind of process for that. They have a different process, but they also said they've, over the years, done different things to try to make it work, and there's no one answer for it, but that's just my opinion.
Just for clarification, the list that's being recommended for funding, they're not all sponsorships. They're actually activities. So I just want to make sure that the public is clear in terms of what is being funded. They're not just about sponsoring funding or fundraisers. There are some activities. For instance, Neighborly Care Network, they help maintain nutrition, and they actually do services for senior residents in Clearwater. So there's a difference between the process, or rather what's being funded, not so much the process, but whatever council directs, whatever there's a consensus for, then staff will move forward with that.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I was kind of shocked when I looked at the vendor list that wasn't included. They're all great part of Clearwater. They're all great sponsorships, and they're part, I agree with what the mayor says. I mean, I'd hate to leave any of these people that we've been sponsoring for years off the list. They're integral part of Clearwater, and a lot of them do a lot of work for homeless, and you got YMCA annual prayer breakfast. Now, I've been to that every year, and boy, I tell you, it's a well-attended breakfast, and it gives our council a chance to get out in the community and talk to people that are there. So I just hate to see any of these ones that we've been sponsoring for years just say, sorry, we're not doing it anymore. That's my opinion.
Councilmember Teixeira?
When this came about, one of the things that I was super concerned about was that all these organizations were collateral damage. And these organizations are doing important work for our citizens, a lot of good work. And when people say fundraisers, those fundraisers are a mechanism that they depend on for funding. They're also used to educate the people about what they're doing. So although I understand the concern behind the initial change, I always felt very uncomfortable that the very organizations that were helping our city became collateral damage because of this big hoopla. So I agree. I want to support these organizations. If you go one by one, they are all helping our citizens and our community, and they're doing important work. And we need to support them, whether we attend their events or we support their fundraisers. But I don't want to penalize these organizations at all. They're doing good work.
Councilmember Menino?
I think it's kind of been identified that what we're now viewing in this process we're going through predates us as a council and as a group, and puts us in kind of an uncomfortable situation, I think, is kind of what we're all tiptoeing around and acknowledging it. I understand where the vice mayor is coming from. The old, what we're saying is long-standing request. These are strong components of our community providing services, and I support them, as the councilwoman just said, 100%. Also, with respect to this uncomfortable process that we're put through, we now have 11 additional requests that were put in, and for us to sit here who weren't a part of the process, I've never even seen it or the LOI to know what it even looked like, what it asked for, what was the requirements, and then to sit up here on the dais and to maybe be judge and jury and start deciding what qualifies and what doesn't, I don't think is fair to those organizations or, to us and staff in the request. So my idea is that going forward, we probably need to, as a team and as a group, refine this process and make sure we're all on the same page and in support of it. probably support what's in front of us now, both lists. But I do think it's also important with regards to what the vice mayor says in codifying some flexibility for the city manager in the fact of having that budget when somebody like a CFY who's not on the list, or a Chi-Chi's Rodriguez, or CMA or Amplify comes up and has an event that we know we really should, as a good community partner, be a part of, that you have that flexibility and that vehicle to include us in that process. So I think it's important that we codify that flexibility for the city manager as well.
I agree.
One of the two cities yesterday, they allot a certain amount to each council member to be able, a budget to, you know, to be able, now there's, you know, that can be criticized because then it looks like, you know, you're favoring organizations that will support you later. That said, that's what they do. They set a certain amount at the beginning of the year, and then it's up to whoever to dish it out. So I do think, I agree with that if, you know, if we're going to approve these lists, then that's great, but we also need to have an additional amount set aside that we can distribute throughout the year as it goes along.
And so noted in this item is that we do, in the proposed budget, have set aside $30,000 in the city manager's budget for this type of thing. So in addition to what is listed here, there is $30,000. And so from an administrative operational standpoint, we've already talked to the gas department and asked, although we'll keep the funding separately, but if they would assist us in terms of how they vet these programs and then take care of all their reservations and things like that, because they've done such an outstanding job for us. And we recognize that when we separated it, you know, we certainly did not do as good of a job in communicating and making sure that the opportunities that we've been provided were then attended. So that is a change that operationally we have already made, and GAS has graciously accepted that they will take that back on. So that will occur, regardless in terms of how you all fund this. We will partner with GAS again.
Yes, we will, we'll basically coordinate all the events like we did in the past. It's just a matter of whether we're funding it or not funding it financially. So we'll, you know, if there's dinners, lunches, things like that, we will coordinate all that. We have a marketing department that can handle all those things. So we're better equipped to do those types of in-kind services for the city, just because we have the staff to do that.
Okay.
And also I have, you know, with my proposal for my sponsorships for this coming year, I'm going to have a discretionary amount for me to approve for gas-related sponsorships that are not on my list as well. So that way we don't have to say, oh, you're not on the list, sorry, call back next year type thing.
Okay. City Attorney?
Thank you, Mayor. So I think maybe a little bit of context I think is helpful, because there's been, you know, several conversations over at least the 3 years that I've been here on this topic. And oftentimes it's kind of piecemealed because there are several subtopics. So just to share my perspective, not so much on the policy wisdom, but just on kind of the issues that I have seen over the past few years. And if it's helpful, great. And if it's not, then just ignore it. So number one, to the mayor's point. So what started a lot of this was media interest in 2021. When I was hired, or during that process, one of the things that was brought to my attention was the media interest in the gas company, and both, as the mayor said, the proportionality of the sponsorships and contributions they were making, as well as the identity of some of the recipients, not that any of them were unworthy, but rather questions of what their tether was to the gas company and whether they were actually marketing customers or things of that nature. So that was kind of what started, I think, a lot of that conversation, at least over the past few years. From there, the question is, well, what do you do with that information, and what are the options available to the council? So from my perspective, and not just because I'm a lawyer, but I do think it's important to start with what the law actually says, because the law defines the outer boundary or outer perimeter of what we can do, and then we all have to operate within that box of the outer boundary of the law. So one of the legal issues here is not so much on the dispensation of funds, because I have opined, and will say in public, that the council has very broad discretion when it comes to legislative appropriations. You are the legislative branch of government, and for the most part, you know, you have broad freedom in how you decide and to whom you decide to allocate funds. However, the legal issues can come up on the ethics side of this. So as pointed out, there are many, many of these charitable organizations that host events. And they're all, as the mayor said, for good purposes, which is to bring people together so that leaders in the city and staff can connect with members of the community who are doing these nonprofits and actually, interface with each other. But when those events take place, there's a cost to host those events, like it doesn't grow on trees. There's either a venue rental fee in some cases, there is food and beverage, there's an admission fee because the entity is trying to raise funds, right? Oftentimes these are fundraising events for them, and that's how they get money because they don't have taxes or other revenue sources. For us, that creates a challenge, and I don't mean Clearwater specifically, but on the government side, it creates a challenge because all of us, I believe, sitting on the dais, are reporting individuals under state ethics law, and so we are not able to accept gifts from city vendors or city lobbyists exceeding $100 in value. A lot of these events are ticketed events, and sometimes the face value alone may exceed $100, and even if it doesn't, let's say we accept a pair of tickets because you want to bring a spouse or a guest. In those circumstances, the value is combined. So if there's 2 tickets that I accept for $60 each, that's $120 worth of ethics. So that's just on the face value, not including food and beverage, which is calculated under Florida law in a very specific way. What I have to look at as the city attorney, when we look at participating in these sponsorship type events, the question is, what is our relationship to that entity that we are wanting to attend an event for? In some cases, they are vendors or lobbyists of the city, and so we cannot accept gifts or freebies from them exceeding $100 in value. In other cases, they are not. So they kind of have to be scrutinized on a case-by-case basis. Tammy does a pretty good job of sending them to me when they come in, at least through official channels. And so I try to vet these before they come to council. Unfortunately, sometimes a lot of folks will reach out directly to council members because they already know you, and they'll say, hey, come to our event. And if those are the cases, we just need to talk about them when they come in to make sure we don't get into hot water. So to give examples, just looking at some of the folks on these lists, because it's not always obvious. Chichi Rodriguez is a perfect example. They are actually a city vendor. Now that may surprise people because it's like, well, they're a charity. They don't put in for RFPs or anything like that. Why are they a city vendor? And the answer is because they actually lease real estate from the city. So Clearwater for Youth is another great example, who we know does a lot of really good things in the community. They're a city vendor too, because they actually lease real estate from us. So whenever we have a formalized real estate relationship or a formalized contractual relationship that goes beyond just grant funding, they are city vendors or city lobbyists. And so that's the area where we have to be mindful that we cannot accept free tickets from them for the most part and going to their events and things of that nature. But there's others on this list who are not. So as a good example, right now, I'm not aware of any vendor relationship with CMA. Well, there may be something that I'm not aware of, but off the top of my head, I'm not aware of any current vendor relationship we have with CMA. So if CMA wanted to invite the council, city manager's office, et cetera, to an event, and CMA is paying for the cost of that for you to attend, I wouldn't necessarily have a concern about that right now. So all of that is a long way of saying that this issue of what you choose to support, particularly when it comes to events, will affect your ability to attend those events as well, at least if someone else is paying for it. People can pay out of pocket for it, but council, in my opinion, doesn't get paid a lot to begin with for all the work you guys put in. Plus, this is just David's opinion, telling council members to pay out of pocket for things that are related to city business and related to city events creates a situation that, in my opinion, is not only unfair to council, but it also creates substantial disparities among the affluence of council members. And so that means that someone who has lots of money can afford to just pay out of pocket and it's not a problem, but someone who's less affluent is not going to be able to attend those events, and therefore the people then have less representation at the events. So that's just an observation. So all that is a long way of saying that as you look at this, just be mindful that you're limited in the tickets and events that can be accepted at free of charge or gratis from city vendors or lobbyists, which are some of these folks, but not all of them. if the city in some way is paying for it, then it's totally fine. The city should be paying for you guys to attend official travel, official business, things that are related to city business. But that's the key, is we actually need the city to pay for a lot of this stuff if you want the ability to attend a lot of those events. And that's just on the law side. There are a couple other things I'd like to add, but I'm happy to pause if the Vice Mayor has a question.
Yep.
Okay, so I've been dealing with this for several years and have been blindsided by a couple of things that I had to pay a lot of money for, but that's okay. But how can we do this? Do you have a budget for each council member for money that if we need to pay for an event that gets paid for with budget out of our fee?
We do, and that was something that we added, I think it was like 2 years ago, and our budget director will come up and speak to that when we were talking about this topic again. So there is a small budget that is allocated for this, in addition to what we're proposing in this one for an additional $30,000, but go ahead, Kaylee.
Right, it's a line item in the council budget. It's, I don't have it with me, but it's not allocated like to each individual. It's basically
Right.
a bucket for council.
So it's a bucket, like
to help cover-
5,000, something like
Yeah.
that?
Yes, yeah. We moved around some lines a couple of years ago that weren't being spent, and we funded that line based on requests from the council.
Okay, all right, that answers my question.
Yeah, continue on.
So that's kind of the legal side of it, but I'm glad that Kayleen mentioned the budget side of this. So just as I see it over the past few years, the big picture decisions for council to make are, to the extent that you want to support these organizations, what source of funds do you want to use? Because there are potentially, although not many, some legal implications that go along with that. So as I said at the beginning, and as the mayor said, kind of what prompted some of this had to do with media interest in the gas company and whether the events that they were sponsoring were directly related to their mission. The gas company can definitely, under Florida law, spend money for marketing, advertising, things that are building their customer base. As the mayor said, it's a competitive business, and they're allowed to and really encouraged to run like a competitive business. However, there needs to be at least some proportionality to make sure that it is rationally related to their business. For the most part, I was pretty comfortable opining that the gas company has broad freedom in deciding where they want to spend those funds in terms of advertising, those types of opportunities. It started to get into a little bit of a gray area from my perspective if they start to sponsor events that are outside of their service area. I don't love the idea of them sponsoring events in Tampa, for example, because that is outside the area in which they are allowed to serve. It's an area they'll never be allowed to serve because of the way that the PSC divides territories. So I would prefer that they limit their events to those that are actually in the gas service area. But even then, I think there's some flexibility, because if there's an event in Tampa, for example, and it's an event that we know that there's going to be prospective gas company customers there, as long as there's a rational tie to what they're doing, I don't really see a legal problem with it. So for the most part, there's not a lot of legal restrictions in terms of where you get the money from. However, the big picture decision for council is for any event you want to sponsor, for any nonprofit organization you want to support, I think you really have three choices in terms of big picture, funding sources. It comes from the gas company is number one. Number two, it's special events, which is part of the city budget. Or three, it's budgeted somewhere else, which could be, as the mayor said, individual council member budgets, could be separate line items for the city manager, et cetera. Big picture, that's your three choices. It's gas company, it's special events, it's something else in the budget, or a combination of all three. So they're not mutually exclusive. So the council can decide that some of it will come here, some of it will come here. You can decide how you want to customize this process. And if you want to have a more flexible process, you can put the city manager in charge of it. She can customize that process. But those are kind of the big picture issues, at least that I have seen over the past few years. But in my humble opinion, what this conversation entails to be successful is bringing all of the issues together, right? Because it's oftentimes we've had several conversations over the years, and the vice mayor's been here for all of them, but they are in some cases, piecemealing these issues rather than bringing them together as one conversation that kind of combines what the legal restrictions are along with the budget interest, with the process. Because all three of those have to work together for a system that works well for council and works well for our partners. So, sorry to go on that long.
Okay.
So just one thing on that, so on special events, because I don't want to convolute it any more than I know this topic is already, this is why we spend so much time on it, is we do have a process for special events. That is something that was codified, I think, last year in terms of how we would handle special events, and that we don't have multiple sources for the groups to ask for example, purchase a table and provide in-kind and all those other things. So the special events portion, I think, has been codified. I think it's a council rule that it comes before council, what dollar amounts have to come before council, what flexibility Parks and Rec has in terms of that. So the special events, I feel like, has been, and we won't, and the clerk and I had that conversation in terms of some of the former longstanding sponsors that have been funded through this won't qualify for this program anymore because we changed that process as it relates to special events. They have to give their entire ask in their special events application. I would not recommend opening that up to change that, because that way, from the transparency standpoint, that event that we are co-sponsoring, we know the entire amount that we are spending on that event. So, yes, this is an additional funding source, but I would not want to commingle that, since we did a lot of work to get that streamlined. And we have those organizations understanding in terms of this is their one shot to ask for everything for an event. So I think the events is a separate. What we can say here is that we won't allow them to come through these other funding sources, because that has been codified in a rule and they have to do it through there. So even if it is being proposed to provide flexibility for the city manager, we won't do it through this. For special events, it has to go through that special events program and application process.
Just to add to what the city manager stated, so the second half, or the second ask of this agenda item, includes a list and does not include, like, for instance, MLK. MLK is receiving funds through special events. That's why they're not on that second list.
Gotcha.
Vice Mayor?
Well, and another thing, what about the community development block grant program that supports community development activities? I heard maybe some of these people on the list were going through that application. Does that, I don't want to have a double hit here.
Well,
So
that's,
some- yeah.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
So some of those organizations, like 360 East, Neighborly Care Network, are known to go through that process, but did not receive any funding through. So what I have done, as part of this process, is shared the information of those asks of these organizations. So if they weren't receiving funding from here, I have shared it. So we do have quite a few organizations that were requesting funds that were located in North Greenwood. I have shared that with the CRA Executive Director. I have shared also with Parks and Rec. So I am sharing with Economic Development and Housing. So I am sharing with other departments to see if there are other funding sources that are more appropriate for those requests.
Okay,
But
good.
those aren't the ones that are on the list.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if you give you any clarity or not. But, and look, I'm not against having rigor, and I'm going to make some comments later just on the overall budget. And I think it's healthy for the city to question everything we're doing, including sponsorships, and say, would we start doing this today if we weren't already doing it? And if not, then what money are we taking away from other things that we could be putting to something to serve the citizens more effectively or engage more? But it just seems like this structure, it has been so far, just in this short time three of us have been on the council, has been kind of bulky to work through and figure out, and I'm just concerned that we're not serving our community. And there are some organizations here that provide social services to our community that reduce the cost of city government. And so I think the information you gathered is helpful for us. I'm just some of the rigidness of the structure of actually appropriating through that is what I think I have the most problem with.
Yeah, and I want to mention, I know that what our budget director's coming up here as well, by having a list with some predetermined amounts in it is also restrictive, and the requests change. Some organizations don't have an ask because they've eliminated their gala, or, you know, something along those lines, but then we have that line item that is tied to that, and then no flexibility to make changes. And so even in, you know, our list that has been around for a very long time, we have not spent all of that because their asks change, and without there being flexibility to identify it, you know, we have not spent that total budget. So Kayleen can speak specifically to that.
Yeah, to your point, it is painful, and when we got this list, right? I mean, because like you said, they're a great organization. So I worked a lot with Brian when we created this list, and we carved out this portion that came to council. And what we did is we took like the last 2 years and we put everything on the list that was paid in the last 2 years. So this list has been the same, but it's very stale. So it was what we paid that year. It might have been a one-time event. And so we bring this list over and over, and we're not paying these, they're not requesting. It's not because we're not, like, they're not requesting because it might have been a one-time event. And I would, and so I just did a quick look. There are 5 of these agencies that we've paid in like consecutively in the last 2 years since we started looking at this and moved it to council's budget. A lot of them were one time, but again, this was like a one-time list that we've moved over year after year, and it doesn't work. It is a little bit broken. And so kind of what we did a little different with the budget is the $70,000 for this grant, and that was based on council, some prior council wanting to have a grant process. And so we moved that $70,000 to the grant process, which Rose is talking about. But we knew that we still had these issues where there was these events and these sponsorships that you would want to be involved in. And so we budgeted at $30,000 for that. And I think ideally we would get away from a list and just be more flexible in the process that we're speaking to, and not bring over these specific things every year, because it really kind of pigeonholes us where we don't want that. You don't want that. You don't want us to tell no, like, and we've, turned down somebody because they're not on the list, and that's not ideal for, what you're trying to do either. So I think ideally, if we had direction, what we would propose is some open flexibility with that $30,000, and then if we get to the end of the year and maybe we need a little bit more, we can move things around and we can fund things. So I think that would be maybe it would kind of solve the problem that you're addressing when you look at these and say that they're great organizations, because they are. And then note that we've done a few other things with the special events process. So we're really kind of covered in a lot of ways. So that would be kind of the recommendation, I would say, that I think solves all the problems, is just kind of setting up flexibility for the city manager. And she'll probably have conversations with you, like, is this something that you want to support? And is this an event that you would want to go to? So that would be my recommendation, knowing that this list is stale and the majority of them aren't asking every year, because it might have been a one-time. We've just brought it over every year because we've been kind of trying to figure out what to do differently.
Well, what you said there, we work well together. You're very transparent with all of this, but we do want the money that's allotted in your discretion to spend on sponsorship to be after consultation with the council. And I'm sure you do that anyway, but we just want to make sure that that's part of it. So.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so we've had conversations that have come up this year even. And so what I would do with this is, as we get the request in, we meet weekly, one-on-one, we meet weekly. And I could do it based off of consensus. Now, consensus does not necessarily mean that everybody's, their opinion or what their recommendation would be recognized, but it would be off of the individual one-on-one consensus in terms of how I will move forward. So I am comfortable in terms of doing that, especially with these, we know the guidelines in terms of what has been done in the past and how these applications come in. Again, the gas department has, a process in terms of vetting these as well. And so I think combined, we've got a good oversight to be able to do this, as well as making sure there aren't multiple funding, sort of requests coming in that are duplicated. Now, that doesn't mean that we won't have an organization that will get different funding. I mean, because some of these organizations do special events. So for transparency, there could be people that appear on multiple lists, but appropriately so. It wouldn't be getting asking for a special event and getting it from all these other sources as well. It would only be through that for the special event.
So I think we like what you just said.
We're in support of
Makes
it.
sense.
And I don't know, city attorney, I don't know if we need to amend anything in the process or anything? Or
Actually, what I would like to have on the record, is there a consensus? Are you directing staff to contact these organizations and inform them that they will not be funded through this process? That's one. So I need to know consensus regarding that matter. And then the second item would be, are you directing staff to fund the longstanding list, which is the second list, that does not include charity work? So they followed the process, and they are a longstanding organization and are not included on that second list because of the prior ask.
It just seems less flexible.
Yeah, and I'm kind of uncomfortable with that too, because we just put.
Do you have something to say to that?
Kind of.
Not to throw you under the bus, but like, I'd rather
Yeah.
hear from what you thought after hearing what the clerk said to see where we can go with this.
I think the list of the people that went through the process to fund with that 70,000, I mean, that was to be moved to grants not for sponsorships. It was grants, community grants.
Yeah.
And so they went through the process as directed, and, you know, we vetted this, we've gone through the process. And that's budgeted for grants. So I feel like it's okay to fund, it's budgeted, it's planned. I think that you'd be notifying people that weren't awarded.
I will notify both that they are,
Okay.
but I think that's the issue, is that there wasn't consensus among the council members regarding that awarded list. That's what I need consensus from.
No, if it was budgeted.
So if we're okay with them, then I will advise them that they are being awarded, and those that are not, I will also let them know that their information has been shared with other departments to see if there are appropriate funding sources. And so that's really what I need consensus from.
Councilmember?
Go ahead.
No, so I just wanted to clarify it again. So we're approving the ones that went through the process for, that amount was 45,790?
Yes.
And then an additional 30,000, is that correct, for other ones that may not be on this list? You said the list is kind of stale.
Yeah.
But you'll call and talk to each one of them and see if, you know, they need funding, and I think that'll
Caitlin?
work, because one of these amounts is.
It's two completely
It's two
separate
separate
things.
things, yeah.
Yeah.
So the
So there's-
30,000 are
yeah.
for the ones that come
Okay.
up during the year that the city manager will discuss with each of you if there's consensus to support. So that, the 30,000 is separate. That has nothing to do with us.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
I'm good with it, yes,
I have
absolutely.
consensus on that.
Okay, so the consensus is to fund that. I just want to make sure we have it agreed upon, we all understand the dollar amount that I have discretion. So if you look at, for example, the traditional list, and we have not spent it, but the 30,000 won't cover that. So if there's, you know what I mean, so I just want to make sure that we all understand that. So to address a dollar amount, since this is our budget work session, if there's an additional dollar amount that we want to have allocated to that, to just let me know. Otherwise, it'll be the funding for the list that went through the process, and then I'll have 30,000 to address the rest.
Is that what you recommend?
I don't know if that's enough. I mean, we're looking at and it's probably worth a discussion, but we're looking at a list. We're saying very well could be stale, and we're pulling some off of them, but we're over $62,000, and we're also stating that there's a handful possibly missing off this list that would be added. So if we're talking about flexibility and giving you that, I don't know if $30,000 is the sweet spot that gives you that flexibility. So I think we might need to come up with a different amount, if that's the route we're going.
What's the staff recommendation for that amount?
So of the old list, right, the sponsorship old list, 62,000, we've only paid 38,223, and so far this year, 34,500. The gap is not that large, so it can easily be absorbed if it's the 38,000 over the 30 that we've budgeted. So I don't think that's a fear at this point. And again, we have the method to amend our budget 3 times a year at least, so we can address that as the needs present themselves. I think going away from this list of these specific organizations is key in that it gives you the flexibility to honor different requests, from this list, anything that's changed or new. So I don't think we have to worry about the 30,000 at this point, this early in the year. So I wouldn't worry about the difference in this saying 62 versus the 30. We can address that. And then the 45,000 is of a $70,000 budget. So if you want to address that gap, maybe with some general direction, that could maybe work kind of a difference.
Yeah, so on that note, I mean, you could do that, you could leave the remaining budget to be able to address additional stuff, so 30 in addition to that 40
Right.
that is left over.
So in total, between the grant process, that was 70,000, and 30, it's 100,000, so maybe giving flexibility between the two. The people did the process, you know, so we would award those.
I'm supportive of that. I think that probably gives the flexibility.
Yep.
And again, it's all general fund money, like, so not necessarily restricted.
Yeah, and for the record, that does not increase our budget, so that's
Right.
what is already allocated.
So we're within.
Comfortable.
Right, sorry. Did you get what you needed?
Yeah, I got what I needed.
City Attorney, though, I mean, just like what we've talked about here, adding this flexibility, is there anything we need to change or amend in this process as far as what's been passed by the prior council?
I will take a look at
You'll
that.
include
I
it.
don't recall us
There's no
doing,
policy.
yeah, I was about to say, I don't recall us doing it by resolution or anything of that
Just a policy.
formality.
There's not even a council policy
Yeah.
that discusses sponsorships.
Yeah, it was more just discussed informally,
Got it.
several times.
Okay,
But no, I don't think the council ever took any formal
okay,
action on that.
good.
And as I mentioned, that we would be handling all the administrative tasks associated with those sponsorships or grants and whatnot. As we historically have done, we just may not pay for it out of our budget.
Good. Okay. Is there anything else on 2.1? Move to agenda item 2.2, discuss median landscaping.
Good morning, Mayor, council members, Art Cater, Parks and Recreation Director. Today, I'd like to give the council a brief presentation regarding our landscape maintenance program as it relates to the various medians and rights-of-ways throughout the city. To do that, I want to just give you a brief historical perspective so you can kind of see where we are today, and why we are today, and what we do today. Prior to 2001, all FDOT medians within the city were maintained by FDOT. It wasn't until between 2001, 2005, we applied for an FDOT beautification grant, which we were awarded. And then following that, we went out and thought it was a good idea to get state money. We went to Drew Street, 19 overpass in 2005. After that, we applied for beautification grants at Memorial Causeway in 2006, Gulf to Bay, Court Street refurbishment, and Missouri Avenue in 2011. That's the last time we saw that grant. Acceptance of these grants shifted the maintenance responsibility from FDOT to the city. Understand that? It's shifted that off the state. And that's, you know, I think it's a great plan for them. I mean, giving these grants out, and then they don't have to maintain those medians. But we did, and we accepted that, and we have been maintaining them. At that time, when we first started getting the FDOT grants, the Parks and Recreation Department in 2007, 2008, had a total of 120 FTEs positions in the Parks and Beautification Division. And that included a lot of things, included the maintenance of the ball fields, the maintenance of everything in the city, the grass, the medians, and everything. We had a total of 120 positions. By 2011, 2012, due to the economic downturn in the economy, the total was reduced to 91 positions, 120 to 91. In Parks and Recreation, that's a decrease of 29 positions. All landscape maintenance and public medians and rights-of-ways and all was shifted from city staff doing the work to contract staff doing the work. Also at that time, we did cost-cutting measures, like if we would mow the grass once a week, it went to maybe once every 3 weeks or once every 2 weeks. Some things went to once a month at that time and still are on that kind of frequency. There were other things we did. You know, we reduced hours in rec centers, we closed restrooms, we cut off the power and the lights to the tennis courts. We did some drastic things back then to get to where we were. Also during this time, there was a robust program of traffic calming all around the city. We put in roundabouts, we put in bump outs, we put in all kinds of things, beautiful things, because everybody wanted traffic calming. Some of those things were just the bump out. They didn't bother us, but most of those had landscaping in there. And when they had landscaping, they had what? They had irrigation in them. They had landscaping that was put in, all those throughout the city. Basically, all those, when they were put in, we didn't get any new people to do that. So we just put it on contractors. Contractors go and maintain them. Since the downturn in the economy, let me just put this here. Hopefully. See that? Those are the lists that, since the downturn, we went to 91. Currently today, 24-25 budget, we are recommending 118 employees. Now, you would look at that and you say, wow, you've come back to where you were in 2007, 2008. The reality is, though, we have new responsibilities. In fiscal year 21-22, the council approved 3 new people for Crest Lake Park. Approved 2 people just to pick up trash on the beach because of COVID and all. We had trash all over. In 22-23, Coachman Park came online. We added 14.3 new people. A total of 19.3 positions were added. Understand, that's for new responsibilities. It's not going back to where we were in the beginning. So the real net gain I look at is 7.75 people, 7 full-time equivalent people to maintain what the city of Clearwater has and the growth that we had in between that. In fiscal year 22-23, as you can see, we added a median maintenance team. To me, that was the first real add back we had to do maintenance of 6 new people. Today, those people, not those 6 people, but the total left, which is 98.7, we maintain over 109 parks around the city, which represents 1,775 acres. And in addition, there are 646 other locations that are city buildings, infrastructure, medians, roundabouts, etc. Of that, over 550 of them are medians and rights of ways that we maintain. And we do that basically through contract professionals. $500,000 a year is in this year's budget that we're requesting to maintain all of those. Included in that number are all of these FDOT medians as well. What does this all say, or what does it all mean? I'll get rid of this. There you go. Well, basically, pretty easy. It just means that we have fewer employees, about 20, and the frequency of quality of maintenance is less than it was in 2007 and 2008. I'm not saying that our quality has gone down necessarily. It's just that we don't have fewer people to maintain more stuff. And we're doing the very best that we can to do that with a combination of our city employees as well as our contract employees. A lot of focus has been on the appearance of the state-owned medians, since they are the main corridors into the city. Gulf to Bay, Memorial Causeway, Edgewater Drive, and to a lesser degree, Drew Street and US and Missouri Avenue. The 6 additional FTEs that I mentioned there were included in the 22-23 budget to provide improved landscape maintenance to all of the city medians, to all of them, not just to Gulf to Bay and the main medians, but to all the neighborhoods, all those neighborhood medians, Morningside, et cetera, that we have down there. So what we really did is we took those 6 people, because what got cut back years ago, we had what we called a projects team. That projects team went out and actually landscaped and planted the plants around the city, kept it nice. That was cut. So what we did is we said, great, we got 6 people, we can now start re-landscaping all of those medians that are everywhere and all around the city. And so that's what we did. And so as you can see, since we got the team together, we basically completed Gulf to Bay medians. This is since 2023. We had a difficult time for a while getting the staff together. When we did, since then, we have redone Gulf to Bay medians, Morningside traffic calming bulb outs and medians and roundabouts, Countryside Boulevard 2 landscapes, medians, Skycrest traffic calming, circles, bulb outs and medians, North Greenwood medians, Seminole Street to Bluff, Baycare Park landscaping, Woodgreen Meadows at Moccasin Lake, land clearing. So they didn't do just those medians. They were our project team that did a lot more than that. The Harbor Oaks medians and then the Hyatt right-of-way renovations have been completed to date. Also, I put in your packet a list of projects or schedule of projects that we intend to complete in the future. We have a schedule basically that goes from 24, 25, 25, 26, and starting 26, 27 that you have available. As you'll see down there that we have, this schedule is what that team's going to be doing. And we've divided that out, we thought, by priorities, by neighborhoods, and by the needs that the citizens have. I know this is long, but this is important for you to understand. It really is. And I don't mean to be this long, but we have landscape designs, installation, and maintenance standards that we follow for all of our medians and median maintenance. These standards are consistent throughout the city. The only exception would be Memorial Causeway, Clearwater Beach, and the downtown core area, where a large portion of our landscape and maintenance resources are. You can see it every day. Go down Cleveland Street. That whole mile that got added just recently, that was part of those 14.3 new people we had. But that's where a lot of the focus of our maintenance is. Our goal is to provide attractive landscape maintenance throughout the city that we can maintain with the resources that have been allocated to this department. We've adopted a responsive level of service that can be properly sustained, I think it's a good word, from year to year, and make Clearwater bright and beautiful, bay to beach. To do this, we must make strategic decisions regarding the type of maintenance we use, the material we use, within the budget parameters that you have given to us. We believe that our major transportation corridors like Gulf to Bay, Cord Street, Missouri Avenue, Drew Street, that grass and minimal planting of plant material appropriate to meet this will meet the goal and the mission of quality, sustainability, and cost-effective municipal services. FDOT has strict guidelines as to what can be placed within the median. It is determined by a multitude of factors, including width of the median, type of curb, length of median, speed limit on the roadways, the height of plant material, which cannot go higher than 18 to 24 inches. So to compare us with other cities is really difficult because each case and situation, even within the city, our medians are different. The plant material we can put in there is different. We've found that the cost to maintain these medians with contractors is still relatively low. The maintenance is not the question. Basically, all of those medians I mentioned are being maintained at $60,000 a year. The project and installation, the cost to refurbish these medians can range anywhere from $200,000 to $400,000. The cost to do Gulf to Bay with city crews that I already mentioned was the first project, and it was the first project because it was needed. If anybody went down Gulf to Bay, it was terrible. It was awful. Dead plant, it was just terrible. Now we have grass and plants, a few plants, doesn't have robust plants moving up and down, but we thought it was the best and the quickest and fastest way to be able to do it, and it's sustainable. And from my eyes, it looks good. FDOT beautification grants are still available, and we will apply for one for Missouri Avenue. The grant is $102,000, of which about $50,000 has to go to the landscape architect to get approval. So we get $52,000 toward the plants, to be real honest with you about that. Or we can do it with in-house labor and just not do the grant. So I get that information from you, so it would be helpful to know whether or not you're wanting us to put in these types of grants, that half of which have to go to consultants to basically get there. So that would be helpful. The current budget for the 6-person median team is about $750,000. Half of that is for salaries, and then the majority of the rest of it has to do with basically plant material and things that we use in the medians. Rather than putting out fires all the time, we attempt to be proactive and provide SOPs, which include plant pilots, the policies, budgets that are sustainable in the long run, and provide a roadmap for the citizens to see and how and where resources are funded. It all boils down to a matter of priorities as to where and how resources will be distributed. If the council wants more robust planning in the medians on Gulf to Bay or other places, certainly can be done. Currently, we are trying to balance the needs of the community, which you have all of those lists of those other areas, the various neighborhoods, while we provide care and resources needed for the main corridors, the beach, and the downtown. It's a work in progress, but I think we are on our way to achieving a workable balance that will benefit the city in the long run. Do you have any questions? I left out a whole bunch too. I mean, just come on.
Would you like some water?
Water. Do you have any questions?
Councilmember Cotton?
So I have one, and again, I'd rather hear like what your thoughts are on it, Mr. Cater, but you just alluded to the $102,000 grant that you could be receiving and 52 having to go to a landscape architect. Is that a city landscape architect?
No, we don't have a city landscape architect.
Do we
So
have
that we hire out a consultant does that, they do the permitting, and the state requires that you have an LA sign off on it and do that. So that is a requirement.
Oh, so we would have to, if we're putting new plants and/or sod in our medians, we still need a landscape architect to sign off on that?
With their mother.
No, currently, we have all of our meetings right now, because we've accepted so many of these grants, we already have an agreement with FDOT.
Okay.
We can go in and we, being the city, with city staff and/or we can contract out. We can maintain those and put the landscaping in that was approved previously. And we have to be careful. Some of the things have changed, but that's what we did at Gulf to Bay. I did not have to have a landscape architect for that. We just went in and did it.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, we're getting ready to do Drew Street and US 19 to put in some additional plants out there. We're hopefully going to get that out of this year's budget, so we don't have to hit next year's budget for that. And then Missouri Avenue would be the next one, which we're proposing to use at one of the state grants. So yes, we can do it, and we don't have to use a state grant. We can go out there with our own employees and do that ourselves. It will just take a little time.
Gotcha, okay.
And you see the schedule that we've been put, that schedule has been changed depending upon what my boss says, and we can go from there.
The reason I bring that up is because if we're wasting, I'm gonna say wasting $52,000 on a landscape architect when we know what can already be put in, I would agree with you, keep the whole full 102 and do it ourselves if we're able to, so.
Yeah, and we can do that.
Vice Mayor?
Art, I want to tell you that you do a great job. You know, I used to get, not complaints, but people would say how beautiful the park in Largo was and go on about that, and why can't we, before we just started doing the Crest Lake refurb, I said, Clearwater has 109 parks, okay? We have a lot more parks than just one big park, and they're all beautiful. Causeway's beautiful. I know you get complaints on certain parts of it, so this is kind of all about that. And I know that Gulf to Bay, there's some places that it's really hard to grow anything out there. And I can give you one place up near Home Depot area.
Yes,
I mean, people run over the curbs, they run over the medians, and how do you grow anything there? How do you keep anything looking good? You know, besides pour concrete and paint it green, I guess, but.
You just have the solution right there, pour concrete.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, and that's something that, I understand.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to let you know that we appreciate all the hard work on all the stuff. Most of it always looks beautiful, and but we do have some areas that need to be addressed, and I'm glad you're looking at that and have a plan to take care of that. So
We do, and when you see something that certainly does not look well or does not look good, if you communicate that with the city manager, and we will get right on it.
okay, thank you.
Okay?
Councilmember Menino?
You're greatly appreciated. Want to thank you and your entire team and your staff. Thank you for putting into context how the city has changed a bit. I mean, we drive around those bulb outs and traffic calming things, and we don't realize that with that slowing down traffic and safety comes more work, more grass, more bushes, more water, as well as us adding more parks constantly. And they don't take care of themselves, and your group does a great job. I guess a couple questions for you. Number one, we talk about balancing priorities and resources, and you are limited. What does running 100% operationally and having the ability to cover everything, what does that look like? Does that look like adding X amount of more employees, increasing the budget? Like, what does that look like for you? Do we know?
I really don't. I don't have an answer for that. Obviously, we are doing the very best that we have, with what we have. I think we do a pretty good job. We do respond to complaints. I hate to be one that just keeps putting out fires, and your question is an excellent question. Certainly, we would love to come back and ask, as we have before for different areas. For instance, restrooms, one of them. We ask for employees to do restrooms, but open them up. But same way with the maintenance side of the organization. We perhaps have a list of what we could do with additional people, and those are things that we would bring forward to you at a budget time. And this year, we're only asking for 0.3 FTEs, not funded by general fund. So,
Thank
yeah.
you for that. And then last question, with all of the neighborhoods and the landscaping needs and the bulb outs and traffic calming, do we have any programs in place where those neighborhood associations are able to volunteer their time and their resources to take care of some of those areas in the community? Because I go to, and we all do, we spend time in some of our neighborhood associations, and they seem to show some of a willingness, and I guess there would obviously have to be some sort of a budget and appropriation and how to help them. Do we have any programs like that?
we do. We actually have several neighborhoods that basically adopt a lot of their medians and triangles and those kinds of things. Generally, their medians, like Grovewood, Morningside, all those entry medians, we have agreements, they maintain them, actually. And we also have volunteer program where we're always seeking volunteers. And we can work more closely to the neighborhoods. I don't have an active program to say, hey, neighborhoods, can you go out and clean this park type thing, but certainly a good idea.
I think it'd probably be worth us making sure we educate some of those neighborhood associations on that pathway and those abilities, because I know I have, and probably have as well, had questions in their interest regarding just knowing that we do have those programs in place someplace, but how to help some of those other associations get involved with the need, just to alleviate some of that burden on you and your team that's already stressed.
It'll help. I mean, the biggest problem are weeds. Pull weeds. You see a weed, pull a weed. We all ought to do it. By the way, you go by a city park, I told my staff, right, see a weed, pull a weed. I mean, they're just everywhere. And that's what our complaints are, from Crest Lake to even down here to Coachman. And we do our very best. And then you have to balance that. Do you use chemicals? Do you have to use mechanical or pull it? So you got that we have to balance as well. Absolutely.
See a weed, pull a weed. I think we can fit that into the budget.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, what he said was really what I was going to say too, is I know through Clearwater Beach Association, because I helped them one day, we landscaped the parking area there between Poinsettia and Mandalay, there by Toucans and that strip there, but it's a city parking lot, so we went out there in 2 to 3 hours, we planted 30, 40 bushes there, and we pick up trash. We've done other landscaping out there, the Beach Association has. So, certainly, I drive Gulf to Bay and I see the medians that Vice Mayor's talking about. We don't want volunteers out there in the middle of Gulf to Bay landscaping. But I do see Councilmember Menino's point, is that if we're short-staffed, if we're really having trouble getting to all these things, that perhaps reaching out to the Neighborhoods Coalition to get them to get more actively involved in helping us, take ownership of some of these neighborhood-type opportunities that would hopefully take some pressure off.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Mayor, one of the beauties of having these work sessions, especially when we have all of our teams here. So this is something that we could help coordinate through our neighborhoods division, right? So to get together with our neighborhoods coordinator and just remind, as we're going out to these homeowner association meetings and neighborhood association meetings, of which our team does, to let them know that these programs are available, because we get all kinds of requests for how can we help, what can we do? And so we have, Joelle is here representing neighborhoods, and so she's nodding her head. So it's something that we will certainly do in terms of coordinating with that. In addition, talking about being a premier employer, we often often have employee groups that are also looking for community projects. It's part of our Leadership Academy is them coming up with a community project. And so with HR being in here, it's something that she can certainly have a conversation with the Employee Achievement Committee to talk about are those opportunities as well something that we could maybe offer as an opportunity for our employees to give back, because we do get requests for that on a regular basis. So those are two avenues in which we can follow up on this.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
Yeah, I do appreciate the opportunity to be able to share about the medians and the situation concern. Okay.
Well, we get a lot of questions about it, obviously, particularly in our gateways areas, to and from the city. And no, it's tough, and you've described why, the challenges are. But certainly our gateways, our entrances, we want those
Understood.
to look nice for not just residents, but the millions of tourists that come into Clearwater each year.
And again, Gulf to Bay will come up, it's on the schedule again, we can look at that, and perhaps at that time, we add to the planting that we have in there. It takes a while for plants to grow, obviously, if you look at that. But truly, when you come down Gulf to Bay now, it is green, it is lush, it is clean. There are so many advantages to doing what we did. There's not the trash that gets caught up into these plants. You don't have to edge them. You don't have to do MOTs as often, and that stops all the traffic on Gulf to Bay when you're having to do that with more landscape. There's all kind of things. So, is it still me, or do you have to announce something, Rose?
This is all you,
Don't go
Art.
to sleep over there.
Get him a bar chair over there.
Art show.
Yeah.
Okay,
Art show. Okay, you want me to go to the next one?
next one, 2.4.
All right.
No, 2.3, excuse me.
Mr. Haluba, it's a work session.
It's a
There
work
is no
session,
public
there's
comment.
no public comment.
Okay.
You can write to us anytime.
Now I'd like to share with you the status of the agreements with Ruth Eckerd Hall and the city's obligation under these agreements. The city currently has, as you know, 3 agreements with Ruth Eckerd Hall to basically handle our performing arts center and the theaters. The Ruth Eckerd Hall, the Nancy and David Bilheimer Capitol Theater, and the Baycare Sound. I'd just like to real briefly, this is fast, key parts of the agreement, operating and capital costs. Ruth Eckerd Hall is responsible for all of Ruth Eckerd Hall and Capitol Theater. They are also responsible for the operating cost of the Baycare Sound. The city is responsible for the Capitol. City's use of facilities. The city may use Capitol 5 times a year at no cost and more if needed at direct cost only. The city may use Baycare Sound for the July 4th and 5th and 10 additional dates at no rental fee and direct costs when production management is needed. There is no provision in the contract regarding the use of Ruth Eckerd Hall, the current contract. Revenues from agreements to the city. The city receives no revenue from Ruth Eckerd Hall nor the Capitol. The city does receive a rebate of $5 per ticket, and we also have the profit issue that we would receive as well. Cash funding of facilities by the city. The city provides no additional funds for the Capitol or Baycare agreements. The city does provide $420,000 per year to fund operations at Ruth Eckerd Hall. Since this is a budget work session, I'd like to focus on the cash funding that is being recommended in the budget to fund Ruth Eckerd Hall operating expenses. So I think that's what has been really requested. A little of the history was shared at the council by Susan. Susan Crockett shared some of the history of how we got where we were. Quickly, June 1st, 81 was the first facility use agreement between the city and PAC. October 15th, 1983, Ruth Eckerd Hall was dedicated, and March 7th, 2001, the lease agreement and the facility use agreement were approved between the city. Now, under that use agreement, the city could use Ruth Eckerd Hall up to 12 times per year for community events and 20 times a year to use Studio One for rehearsals with no fee. We had to pay out-of-pocket costs. City agreed to be the source of funding for operations of Ruth Eckerd Hall, contributing $412,000 a year adjusted for inflation. There is no stipulation how the funds were to be used. The city continued to do this until 2008, 2009, when the annual payment amount topped out at $458,330 for that budget year. In fiscal year 2009-10, the budget, due again to this economic downturn, the city reduced that amount and the subsidy to $400,000 a year. Prior to July 1st of each year, the city, by written notice, could inform PAC that funding was not available for the following fiscal year, and that occurred, if that occurred, PAC did not have to host the city events for that year. So any year we decided not to, we didn't have to host, they wouldn't have to host those events for free. So it appears those two things were kind of tied together loosely in some way, form, or fashion. On November 8th, 2005, the First Amendment to the Facility Use Agreement was approved, which basically added, we had a Clearwater Community Chorus, we had a robust theater groups that we had. We used to put performances on back then, and it was great, but we got to the point where we asked Ruth Eckerd Hall to do this. They were willing to do that. The city gave them $20,000 a year for that. On March 8th, 2018, the Second Amendment to the Facility Use Agreement was approved. The Facility Use Agreement entered into on March 7th was basically terminated. So everything I said, I shouldn't even have said, because it was already terminated, okay? So we're now to the agreement that we really deal with, right? See, I see our attorney over here. Yeah, that's what I should have started with, shouldn't I? That's okay. Anyways, the Facility Use Agreement entered to on March 7th, it was terminated, but a new paragraph, 26, was added to the lease agreement. So they got rid of the use agreement, but they added it to the lease agreement between the city and PAC to address the annual commitment of funds by the city to PAC. The city agreed to contribute $420,000. Obviously, the $400,000 we had gone down to, the $20,000 for the chorus, $420,000 per year to PAC for maintenance and improvements to the premises, including such things as repair, custodial labor, general maintenance, fixtures, replacement, etc. The city is not obligated to pay these funds if the city determines that sufficient funds will not be available for such purposes. But the city must give written notice to Ruth Eckerd Hall prior to July 1st if funding is to be reduced or eliminated for the following year. And I gave some options. Obviously, I probably shouldn't do that. Y'all got plenty of options that you want to decide, but some of the things that you could do is just simply approve a minimum of $420,000 or more, if you want, for fiscal year 24-25, according to the current agreement, since we've missed the July 1st deadline notification. Or, number two, staff can try to negotiate with Eckerd Hall to reduce that amount, see if we're successful. Three, we could approve funding for fiscal year 24-25 and provide written notification to Ruth Eckerd Hall prior to July 1st of 2025 regarding future allocations. This will need to be done every year. It's not just for 1 year. Or we could simply amend, it's not simple, but amend the current agreement to Ruth Eckerd Hall to give them more funds, less funds, decreasing funds, or no funds. With that, I'm available to answer your questions.
Councilmember Cotton.
So I was the one that requested this because especially with what we have going on with the the Baycare Sound and the additional funding costs or split that we talked about on Monday, and then going through the budget and seeing $400,000, just going to Ruth Eckerd Hall originally blew my mind. I'm like, what are we doing here? So I wanted some more information on why those funds were being allocated, where specifically they were going. Because as I alluded to on Monday, it's my job to ask the tough questions and make sure that taxpayer dollars are being taken care of. One of the still mildly frustrating things, and I again went to Ruth Eckerd Hall's website to find their budget, right, to help me articulate to people where those funds are being used on the facility in which we're paying for it to be used. I did have a conversation with one of the board members there of some operating costs. And in my opinion, after that conversation, it does seem like we're getting a good deal out of the $400,000 that we do give to Ruth Eckerd Hall in the fact of what they're putting into the building and how they're using those funds to keep the building up with maintenance. I don't know if staff can do this or if we can get with Ms. Crockett to see if there's any way that they are able to show where those funds went to help with the budget of their facility. just so if we're ever asked by the public, or just easy to have for us to give to the public, should they ask, to see your funds are being spent wisely. That was the whole reason to this.
Right.
So thank you for it, appreciate it.
Understood.
But to also bring these four up to speed, because they might have seen it and wondered why I was on there. It was me.
I think I saw it somewhere, but do we know how this funding for Ruth Eckerd Hall compares to the funding that the city of Tampa gives to the Strauss
Strauss.
and the St. Petersburg gives to the Mahaffey? I want to say it was in line, or it was
Yeah,
a little bit less, I think, than what those other two
I
gave.
do believe it's less,
Yes. I
which
believe
I have
it's
uncovered further, but
Absolutely. Other municipalities, cities do support the arts, and that's one way they can do it. I did get an email from Sarah Prout this morning, actually, to share that she said that the subsidy for Mahaffey, the city subsidy for 22 through 24 was $626,667, that the city gave that. For the Star Center, it was $580,480. So these are just things that they do support, the cities do, so, in any event.
So to give us three options, what's the consensus of the council?
One for me.
I'm gonna approve it.
I'm good with it. My initial reaction was, and I don't know if we're covering it now or later in this discussion, was looking at what our overall bond payment is on that 30-year bond, and seeing that we're coming short of that in our revenues from Ruth, for year one. I know we're, hoping and estimating that year 2 and 3 will obviously be better, but I just had that thought at one, like, is there a way that, we see what difference that gap is, that we come up short, and until that bond payment is covered, we subtract it from that 420 to meet that? Is it a 200 and something? I don't know what that exact number is. And then in hopes of year 2, we're covering our bond payment at least out of it, and then that number would go back to what it is at 420. But that was just a discussion.
Can I just clarify so you're referring to the bond payment of the sound, Baker
Correct.
Sound, not the $420,000 that goes to Ruth Eckerd Hall?
Correct.
For the facility, okay, just
Correct.
wanted to clarify that.
well,
I think the
Go ahead.
consensus, I'm here, keep the 420 for this year.
agreed. After
And then
I got
that's
more
up to us.
information,
Yeah.
I would just like it to be more open, transparent, if you will, right? That's the good word, to the public, to be able to make those decisions and come to those conclusions on their own. They should be able to go to Ruth Eckerd Hall, it's a nonprofit organization, in my mind, and say, oh, here was their budget, this is their expenses, and they got 400, that went to this, it offset. They actually spent $1 million more on keeping the facility up going, which I didn't say, right now, that's still just my words. I would need that paperwork to corroborate the information that I talked to the board member about, So it's those types of things, it just,
Well, the reality, it is simply revenue for their budget, their greater budget, which is, we do have their annual report, so there's, in there, it's like $11 or $12 million operating budget, so somewhere that 420 pays for something in that.
oh no, I hear you, for
Yeah,
sure. I want to
okay.
get in there.
I know you do.
City manager?
And this did come up during our work session on Monday, where in the presentation, Ruth Eckerd did provide the amount of capital investment. And so I think that's valuable information to say, these are the capital investment dollars that exceed the 400
For sure.
that we are providing them, that they are making into our facilities. And so I think, to your point, certainly could do a better job in tying it together so you can see in terms of what our contributions are in regards to what they are contributing, as well as the operators of those facilities, and how those, the monies are coming back into our buildings in terms of funding. So it's something, and I know we gave her that feedback, her being Susan, that feedback on Monday, and so I anticipate that she will be providing, and we'll follow up with her to make sure she does provide that information to lay it out, so we can see what those capital projects were in more detail for all 3 of their facilities.
Yeah, even like a biannually or an annual update, here's what you gave as a city, thank you so much, and here's what we spent. I think in the presentation, it was $2.1 million or something they've put into it.
Yeah.
But it would be nice, to see that, and I agree.
It's just to
with-
have the facts when somebody asks us from the public, you have facts to show, well, this is what they spent.
certainly we can get that, and they would certainly provide that.
So with direction, I'm okay with as is, in my opinion, with what's going on.
Okay.
I think from a legal perspective, is he awake?
He is.
Okay.
Just
It's
because I'm
probably-
looking down, correct, right, I'm looking down at the computer screen in the depths of the contract, so yes, and listening, so not only looking, but listening.
Yeah, okay.
Was there a question for me?
No.
Okay, I think we're good there.
All right, we ready for the next one?
Move to agenda item 2.4.
Just for the public, so option one is, there's consensus, perfect.
Can- Before we move on, Mr. Mayor, I do want to kind of go back to what Mr. Menino was saying, though. It's not, I think we've covered this, but with that bond payment, in lieu of what we are giving them, is that what you were saying? Two different things, because it is the
Yeah.
Baycare Sound, but trying to offset those costs so we're not behind somewhere else trying to find funds. Is that what you were getting at?
Yeah, exactly, because in looking at the pro forma, it almost doesn't show us even coming close to break even on it until year 3.
Yeah, I just wanted to
Yeah.
bring that back in.
No, thank you. Didn't know if we wanted to have that discussion or, but I'm good either way.
Okay,
Good.
I think we're
Good to
good.
go.
We ready? We ready?
2.4.
Okay. Coachman Park and the Baycare Sound Baycare Sound occupies about a third of the park. We call all of Coachman Park. It just happens to have an amphitheater within our park, okay, within the city park. During that time, we have had to adjust many ups and downs, trials and tribulations for this last year. That is not unusual for the first year of operations in the size of Coachman Park. Some of the biggest issues had to do with the following: getting comfortable with our agreement with the Ruth Eckerd Hall, dealing with punch list items. It's just now a year past that, so we're still trying to, I think there's only 4 more left, our engineer has said, city engineer. Working on the repairs and completing the warranty items that we have, developing a good maintenance work schedule. I mean, it was new for all of us. We had new staff there and to develop that. Learning how to program events in the park. It's a brand-new park. We have to learn how to do that. And we're still learning each and every day, and we recognize that some things work better than others, and that there's still a lot of issues to deal with down there. I mean, for example, we know we need to repair the flooring in the restrooms. We need more restrooms. We need better signs for the restrooms. Up lights on the planter beds are broken and malfunctioning. Plant material needs to be replaced. Better soil components are needed throughout the park. More shade throughout the park and playground. Not enough handicap parking, design modifications that may be needed in the future for the venue, et cetera, et cetera. Staff is attempting to work on these as well as simply handle day-to-day operations of the park. It should be noted that this park is open 7 days a week, 365 days a year, just like we do on the beach. Staff is in the park from 7 a.m. until 9:30 every day. The park is as well, basically, the staff that maintains that works also what we call the core downtown area, and it's maintained by 17 full-time equivalent people. It includes Coachman Park, it goes up Cleveland Street, takes care of Station Square Park, all of Cleveland Street, ends at Crest Lake Park, and the Mikada will soon be added to that responsibility for those teams. 17 people do that. Additional staff, the park through, we staff the park, it's open, programming, we have programming, maintenance, but we also have programming in the park that we program year round. The additional staff programs things as little as yoga to Market Marie and Sea Blues, et cetera. The cost to maintain and program the park and the downtown core area for 1 year is $2,665,000. An annual revenue brought in for this past year was, it included parking funds basically, or an estimate on it, was $163,000. This results in an operating subsidy of $2.5 million. Our task during the first year of operation was to energize the park with as many free events as we could and to bring life and vitality to the park. Parks and Recreation staff have been dedicated to fulfilling that goal from the opening of the park until today. These figures do not include any revenue from Baycare Sound or the capital expenses for Baycare, as well as debt service on the bond for the park. You can see from the attachment that was given to you that by adding these items to the park operating expenses, the net total for the first year cost, including the opening week expenses, will be $4,882,000. It is unfortunate that we do not have one complete fiscal or calendar year completed to be able to share with you because those things just haven't worked out. Ruth Eckerd Hall fiscal year is the same as the city's, while the number of events are based on the calendar year. Revenue generated by Ruth Eckerd Hall for the first year of operation, this is from when they began, July 1st, 2023 to June 30, 2024, for the city from tickets was $488,020. That's the first year. That's what it says. Those are from ticket rebates, and it represents 33 events. If you count events by the calendar year, which we do because that's what the contract states, in 2023 there were 25 events. In 2024, which we're currently in, there are 28 events that basically have been done or are scheduled for this year. And in 2025, there is one event that has been scheduled. That's it. Questions? David or Jay can answer the financial questions for you.
I'll go first, because I asked the city manager to put this on the agenda for today. So, I've lived in this world with sports facilities companies for 10 years, where we open new venues, and it's expensive to open them and expensive to maintain them. I think the biggest mistake a community can make is to put the amount of money that City of Clearwater put into this park to make it nice and then not keep it nice. So all the things that you are doing to keep it vibrant, keep it looking great are appreciated, money well spent, needed. Concerned some about, we've talked about with the construction companies about the bathrooms and some other things out there that should not be deteriorating like they have right off the bat. But everything else, landscaping and everything else, you've had a great crew on that. It looks really nice. It doesn't look a year old. It looks like it just opened. And so I'm all for that. I would also say that having opened similar facilities, parks around the country, that it usually is a big number, like you've just described, up front to subsidize it. I was on a committee that met before the park construction started with the prior city manager, and I encouraged that group to think about programming that park way ahead of opening, because this is what you get. If you don't build that calendar in from day one when you open, you start off with a large deficit. And so my challenge to our team is to, and to Ruth Eckerd Hall, it's what, I kind of got into it a little bit, the work session on Monday. We've got to improve that number, this subsidy. It cannot stay where it's at now. It's got to go down. And the only way it goes down is because the expenses you've described are necessary to make it maintained, is to generate more activity and more revenue producing activity. So I understand at first we were bringing in events and we weren't charging, but we take just the green, and I know everybody's tired of me talking about the Purina Dog Challenge, but it was a great event. But that, the Market Marie that's down there once a month, those kind of revenue generating activities, we need to go out there and really, at this point, on our part, for the green part, the part that's not the sound, we need to be really proactive in bringing events and charging a fair fee to the event owners for use of a very nice space right next to the water. And so I know we're looking at that, what's a reasonable price to charge event owners for coming in. But also, we've challenged Ruth Eckerd Hall on the numbers you've shown, and my point the other day, and my point this morning is I asked, what is the 5-year pro forma going forward? What's our goal, taxpayers, and operating the park? As you've just described, their responsibility for operating expenses is really within that fence, but there's a whole lot more that helps that facility, maintains that facility outside that fence that's on us. So I really want to know what's our 5-year plan clearly, and I asked that the other day. And has that changed? I asked Ms. Crockett, has that changed? Do we still feel confident that, we're on the track of what they've shared already? And I know they shared some numbers, some forecasts, and then we also had an outside entity, the consultant shared with us some numbers too on what we could expect for revenue growth through the sound. But I want to see us have a clear plan and a forecast goals for how we're going to generate more revenue to the park to cover the expenses and reduce that annual subsidy, because that's a big number. And I can tell you for the space I'm in, even though it's necessary, it's a lot larger subsidy than I have seen in my professional experience over the last 10 years with a newly opened park. And it's a bigger subsidy because I don't believe we've generated the revenue from the park that we often are able to generate for sports facilities clients, because we book it ahead of opening. We make sure it's fully booked before we open the doors. And I'm not sure we did that here, but not to look backwards. My concern is, going forward, we have a pro forma business plan with targets for generating more revenue from not just the sound, but the entire park, to get this subsidy down for the taxpayers, because it's a very big number right now. So I don't know if any of the council wants to share. Councilmember Cotton?
I completely agree with what the mayor said here, and I think that we can all look back at Monday and see that, I was coming out of the gate a little hot there, because yes, we need to make sure that we're generating revenue from the park at a fair rate, but in my mind, that's why we have the sound, is because it's going to be and should be bringing in big ticket items and people filling those seats, right? If 5,000 out of a 9,000 venue is what we're shooting for, I want to see 5,000 people, not just under 2 for the past 3 shows, which I think I made that point clear to Ruth Eckert, and I look forward to what they have coming up in 2025. But I agree, I'm not even in the space that the mayor is, and I would think that if you're getting ready to take it over, you already have it lined up. Even if you're not 100% sure that you have it coming, you're 75%, I'm getting 75% of my year booked beforehand to make sure I don't look bad in my first year, right? So I hope that things increase, and I know that you have no control over that, but that's just where I'm sitting, so I agree.
Sure.
We're truly in a unique situation. It's very challenging. I agree with everything that's been said. But I want to take a step back and sort of look at the reality of it. We have 109 parks, and not one of them was there an intent for revenue or be self-sustainable. This is an added value to our citizens. It's a service that we provide, and it's our environment. However, this park was very expensive, and this park is attached to an amphitheater, so it does make it unique. But I do, I recognize the challenges with this big project and trying to get it to a level where we're more comfortable financially. But I think it is challenging. This is a park, just like Crest Lake. I mean, does Crest Lake, is it self-sustainable in the revenue that it brings in? Moccasin Park, Glen Oaks, on any of those parks?
Very
Right?
very little. We do bring in some, but it's nominal.
Exactly. So what makes it unique is that this park, there's an expectation that there isn't in other parks. As
Because this is the venue.
correct.
This is not like those other parks. The Green, particularly, it's a venue, just as much as a venue as the sound is a venue. That open space for festivals, whatever we bring in, even if it's a running event. The Ironman was down there, staged. It's a venue.
So you perceive it as a venue, not just a park?
I think the community does, and I think we should, because there are other parks around the country that view the same type of space. Premier space right by the water, they view that open space as a venue. And I know we do have, nominal use fees for it, but particularly we bring in, I'm not picking on Ironman, but particularly we bring in a big event operator like Ironman, I just think we need to, and we had this discussion before in an earlier session about a for-profit event operator coming in and operating an event. I just want to make sure we're being fair to the citizens of Clearwater in providing the event operator with this fantastic venue. And I think it would be competitive space if we got out there. And I know from conversation with the city manager and Mr. Cater that that was not the direction our staff has been given prior to today. This is a different mindset. So that's all I'm saying is, I think as a council, we should give our staff direction to rethink how we're doing that, to seek events for that space too. In addition to pushing Ruth Eckerd Hall to meet their numbers and to meet the expectations that they set on what we're going to generate to come through. But I see it as one big park. It's just, Mr. Cater said, I don't just see it as, okay, the sound's over here. It's all one thing because there's so much that we do outside that fence to support the sound that I see it as one big park. So, yeah. Vice Mayor?
I agree with both of you. I mean, we have to look at getting the best money for this as possible. But, you know, when we discussed this park back 6 years ago, I mean, we weren't really talking ROI. I mean, we were just saying, this is a great opportunity to bring this to, be in line with ULI recommendation. And miraculously, this park got built. Now that it's here, but we did talk about what could be done and what the park could be used for. You know, you've got a music venue there that we need to have as much return on that as possible. We do have a big green area which could be used for a lot of different things. And we have the lake, which we talked about, a great place for having weddings and all kinds of, so the whole park was talked about being used, but we really didn't know at that point how we were going to set that up. We talked about putting together a committee that would look at all the events for the park, and, you know, that really hasn't come
Yeah, it is.
to fruition.
Friends of Coachman Park, right?
Yes, we
It
do
has
have
been
Friends of
formed.
Coachman.
Well, I mean, they don't
They-
book events like we thought that, you know, a committee would do to keep it something going all the time. I'm not saying they don't or won't do that, but, yeah, I think that, with that being said, we ought to be looking at trying to get more use and more monetary return. Because when we have events in the green and in the lake area, I mean, not so much the music event, it brings more people down to look at the park. I mean, that last music venue, what was that, Monday night? Or
Sunday night.
Sunday night, yeah, I saw you there, and, you know, there wasn't a lot of people there, but a lot of people that were there, it was their first time. Because it was a low-cost event, and that's really what with Ruth Eckerd said that they wanted to do is to, and I'm amazed that when I go out in the public and I talk to people about, have you been to the Sound? They say no, and I say, you live in Clearwater and haven't been to the Sound yet? Most everybody that goes there loves it, so we need to try to do more events there. I'm all for that. I think it's a great park for having that. And, you know, Crest Lake too.
Absolutely.
When I was a kid, we used to have fishing tournaments there. I don't know if there's any fish in the lake, but,
There are, but I don't know if you want to eat them.
Different topic.
anyway, no, I think we're on the right track, and we just need to push
Okay.
to keep it going, so.
Councilmember Menino?
Yeah, I'm with you. When I first saw that large number, that's a bit scary of a number, and I hope that we find ways to drive additional revenues as a team, as a city, as the Sound and Ruth Eckerd Hall have to, because I think in almost all of the performas, we're falling short of, you know, what where we thought we were financially going to be. And I think in respect to the taxpayers or taxpayer dollars, we need to find a way to, above all else, try to cover service to our bond payment, if nothing else. I agree with the councilwoman said, it is a park, and parks aren't there to make us money and generate revenue, but the sound makes that park a completely different venue, and we have to find ways to reduce that number and reduce it greatly. And I hope we continue to, and programming is key. I agree with you 100%, and I did hear you months and months leading up to it that we needed to make sure we program. And I'm looking forward to it, and that's to take nothing from the venue. Absolutely love it. It's beautiful, thoroughly enjoyed some of the concerts, but I'm with you. I want to see, 4,000 people. If our sweet spot is 3 to 4 or whatever that sweet spot is, make sure we're bringing in the talent that hits it. And I do recognize that doesn't happen overnight and it takes time. I just hope that we can get there sooner than later.
If I may. So I just want to make sure that we all understand in terms of the direction, because it does sound like there's consensus, but it's different than what we have been focusing on as it relates to the green. The direction on the sound is clear. I think we've communicated that clearly with Ruth Eckert, and we will continue to do so with that. But specifically talking about the remainder of the park and the green, what we're talking about in terms of treating that like a venue, we can do that if that is the direction of the council. While trying to maintain, the community events, which are not revenue generating, because the community does want access to the park. That is something that is very important to them. So we will, if that's the direction of the council from the result of this topic, certainly shift our focus to being more revenue generating on scheduling the green. Just with an understanding in terms of, no good deed goes unpunished, and what the response to that would be, and keeping in mind of making sure that it's still available for the community for community type events as well. So if that is the consensus, is that we want to focus more in terms of revenue generating, treating that green like a venue?
We already charge for use of park space, all of our parks.
Absolutely.
So we're not doing anything differently than we do. I think, though, that the pricing on that space, use of that space, should be different than other parks because of the uniqueness of the location of the venue. That's all I'm saying. And I wanted to go back to what Councilman Scher is saying. I know lots of these facilities around the country. They don't, or types of facility parks around the country. There's no expectation that it will ever be break even. And you know that they will have to subsidize these in all of our parks to some extent. It's just getting that number down and you leveraging the opportunity. And I think that would be my point, City Manager.
Sure.
It's not that we start charging where we're not already charging. We just look at that particular space and the prime space it is. And there are smaller spaces down, like on the steps. I know they have yoga classes around the steps right next to the, that we're not going to charge for that. But that big green open space, there are, I think, event owners that would bring people to downtown. That would be very attractive space for them if we would market it in some way and try to get more events down there that would pay something.
Yeah, and that's what I'm focusing on. So agreed, I didn't hear anything in here in terms of changing, in terms of what we charge for. It's a matter of the focus on the programming. Right. That's what I'm trying to make sure in terms of clarifying so that, the parks programming team knows what it is they're working on. And what I'm hearing consensus for is that programming shift to be more the priority, to be focused on revenue generating events to take place on the green, which is an area that is already, like I said, in terms with the fees that are there. But that's a change in the focus for the programming, and so that's why I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, and that's what you want the programming team to focus on.
If I can, so just to kind of give you guys a background of why there's a direction shift, is because in these conversations regarding the park and all those community events that we had, outreach events, there was significant expression of this park has to be for everybody. It has to be free. It has to be accessible to everybody. It felt like it was a city park, not just a community park. So I think that we were very sensitive to that, and perhaps that was conveyed in the planning. However, I'm okay with shifting that focus to, trying to get that number down and doing some more aggressive planning, but just let's keep it cognizant that to not completely, block so that there's no accessibility by everybody. You know what I mean? Like, let's not overbook it so it's the whole park every weekend, because we did get a very clear message from the community that that was a park for everyone. So if there's some sort of, balance there.
But I would share with you that if there's not an event going on there, that space is empty. There's no one down there using it, for the most part. And that's consistent with parks throughout the country. Parks that are not programmed, they are not active. There are very few people that just go down to an open green space, and there will be people from time to time, but particularly that location where we're at now with our revitalization of downtown Clearwater, it is just not an active space. I can tell you Splash Pad gets a lot of activity, but with the heat we've had, that open green space, unless we've got an active event going on, it is not an active park.
And just to also, on that note, provide other opportunities for, revenue generating, because we have an outstanding team that have other ideas. Parking fees, increasing parking fees, the marina fees, impact fees. There are other things that we can deploy that will help offset some of the cost of that park. It's not just, to be able to achieve that balance while reducing the subsidy. Those are some options that we can certainly deploy. But again, those are not easy things for the council to pass on as a result of it. But those are other, revenue generating options available.
I have a question for you, Mayor, because I agree with you 100%. I see the open space, and even for other events outside of the sound, it's a premium location. You have a great view. It's a wonderful, very wide open park. Do you think that we should be increasing fees for that park specifically? And I'm not saying like something crazy, $100, but I think of like a state park when I go camping. You get a premium spot, it's even in the state park, it's $25 more, We have a premium park, looks over the intercoastal, great views at sunset. I don't disagree. I think that raising the rates for that specific park compared to a smaller, more landlocked park up in Countryside, I mean, they're different, So I would not be opposed to raising the rates a little bit too for these events to come down there. And I also agree, I think that when I've been down there with the family, it's usually been during an event time, and we've already hit it on the head. I'm not going to try and bring it up, but the shade aspect of it, especially during the summer, I don't go down there. My kids don't like going down the slide because it's so hot, right? So until we're able to kind of fix those types of things, I don't disagree with you. I think we need to get people out there.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Cater.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, item 3, city manager verbal.
So before we go into the city manager reports, I just want to remind the council, this is your opportunity. If there's any additional, budget questions or conversations that you want to have, let's do that now. We have concluded all of the presentations that were requested, but that doesn't mean that the opportunity for council to have any additional conversations about the budget. We've got the whole team here. We are happy to do so. Next steps will be the public, the work sessions that are scheduled, not work sessions, but the public hearings that are scheduled for the budget, which are scheduled for September. So if there's no additional conversations or changes, recommended changes, then we will present the budget as been presented to the council to those public hearings.
Okay. You have something? I do, but I'll let you go first.
Okay, mine was just more of a comment, especially that we do have everybody in here. You could see how we collaborated earlier today with coming up with a solution. I am all for making your jobs easier. So when we're up here discussing something, it's great that we're having the discussion. If you feel like you might have that solution and it will make your job easier and government more efficient, I definitely want to hear it. Obviously can't speak for the people up here, but I would have to say that that was very productive in the very beginning, right? We utilized the person who's the expert in her field there to come up with a solution that makes it easier, and we came up to a good consensus with that. So I would have to believe my fellow council members up here and the mayor would agree with that statement, but I just want you guys to know from my aspect, like that's what I want from you all. So thank you very much for all the work that you guys are doing. I think that we're doing a great job, and I want to be up here to help you be the best that you can. So thank you again.
Anybody else? I just want to make an overarching comment, which I've shared with the city manager a number of times, but I haven't had, of course, we can't meet, outside the sunshine, so I haven't had a chance to talk with the four of you about it. So, this proposed budget is creating an $8 million deficit, or about somewhere in that range. And so we're gonna dig into our capital reserves to get us through this fiscal year, which I'm okay with. We have been building that up over the last 5 to 10 years to where it's, arguably we do need to spend some of that money that we've been putting back. So I'm okay with it this year, but I do, and I've challenged the city manager to challenge all of us to going forward, not assume we're going to dig into the capital reserves every year to fund some of these big projects. And Mr. Raven shared with us, what would happen to our reserves if we keep the millage the way it is without a millage increase over the next 5 to 10 years. And it would certainly be, I would not increase the millage today, knowing what our citizens are going through, utility bills, property insurance. So it wouldn't be something I would consider in today's environment, and I don't know what the environment will be for our citizens, our taxpayers 3 or 4 years from now. I will always, anytime we're asked to consider a millage increase, I'll always think of them first and think about how they're tightening their own belts to make their own living expenses before we tighten our belts as a city to make this city operate. So I'm okay with it for this year, but I'm concerned that the expectation has been, if we don't, like the discussion we just had on Coachman Park, we don't find a way to get that subsidy down. I think the staff compensation, and the city manager, I've met with many of our staff, all for it. We need to not just be competitive, remain competitive with other municipalities and how we compensate our staff. So that's not an area that I want to see cut. I do challenge us as a team and as a city and all the city staff and the city manager and the council to use what Dr. Peter Drucker used to call years ago in the private sector to an abandonment theory, to regularly have department meetings, to think as a team about what things would we not start doing today if we weren't already doing them. And if the answer is no, we wouldn't start that program, we wouldn't start that service, or we wouldn't do it in this way if we hadn't already started doing it 10 years ago. What resources are we taking away from some other opportunity? These capital projects that are coming up in the next 4 or 5 years that we could be spending that money on. And just with the way technology continues to advance, I can't keep track of, what I'm supposed to, had a television interview on a different, it wasn't Zoom, it wasn't some other platform yesterday, and it took me forever to figure out how to get that. The way technology, and we all know AI is coming, that it's giving us opportunities to do things more efficiently and to rethink not just the way we operate as a city government, but also think about our use of space and our use, that's very costly to the city and our taxpayers. But again, I'm okay with, and I've shared this with city manager a number of times, I'm okay, we have built up these reserves over a period of time, but personally, I want to see us begin today thinking about next year's budget and thinking, and the summary of the budget, which I read 2 or 3 times this weekend, refreshed myself just where we're actually spending money, where might there be some areas where we could save some. There was a lot of discussion about increases, and inflation, we all know, has gone up, all that. But going forward next fiscal year, I would like to see us talk about ways we are innovating to reduce cost, and that the upcoming budget in the next year reflects some creative things we've done to rethink the way we do government, to utilize these new technologies coming along, to be more efficient, and at the end of the day, show our taxpayers here in Clearwater that we are tightening our belts every day, just like they are, to make sure that we're living within the budget that, the revenues that we receive. So that's the only thing I wanted to share, just overarching, so I don't know if anybody else has anything to add to that. I think we're all in agreement, but again, we don't have a chance to have this discussion outside this forum, so I just wanted to share that with you all because I've shared it with the city manager frequently.
I share a lot of your concerns. When, 2 years ago, our reserves were quite healthy, but 2 years ago, we didn't realize how much our infrastructure has deteriorated, and our capital projects just keep adding up, and they're very big. So thinking about next year's budget is important, being innovative, being creative. I agree with you, we need to start looking now, because like I said, over the last 2 years, the things that we're facing are big ticket items, and we need to plan ahead.
Okay, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, a lot of these capital projects that we've got coming up have been delayed and delayed and delayed for years and years. I remember, even City Hall, we talked about it 20 years ago. We're finally doing it, which I'm glad we're doing it. But, we do have to keep an eye on it. And even though property values have gone up and we've got more money, it's all going out to capital projects. And I agree with you, Mayor, that, we've got to look ahead. We can't wait till the time gets here and decide, where's all our reserves going? So I think we've got that. I think we have a great reporting on that with our team, and I think we'll make the right decisions.
City Manager?
Yeah, so if I may to that, just as a reminder, so, as soon as we get through this budget process, which will be in September, we immediately start planning for the next one. And we do that through my favorite document that's very near and dear to my heart is our strategic plan. And so we're going to be bringing that forward in January. So that is just a few months away. And that, hearing this direction is what will guide us in terms of how we will update our work plan for going forward. And so you will hear in January a response to this consensus in terms of how we're going to move forward in the budget. And we will present our work plan and an updated strategic plan that will be our recommendation on how to best accomplish that. So there's a process, and again, it'll start right away. So you don't, we won't be having this conversation again. We will repeat it again at a budget work session, but we start significantly in advance of this, as early as January. So be looking forward to those documents and know that that's the importance that document is. It's what drives our budget. And what it is that we will be working on and focusing on in the year forward. That's our 1-year plan. So that process will start here in January. Well, we'll be working on it now, but you will see it in January.
Okay. All right.
So I want to take the opportunity, because we do have the majority, if not all of our leadership team here. Obviously, this budget process, through the budget director and the finance department, they do an outstanding job, an absolutely outstanding job. However, they can't do that outstanding job without the input from all the team here. We do have a very collaborative process as it relates to the budget, and they've really done a good job. It's been another challenging year. I think every year will have its challenges, and the strength of this team is how they face those challenges, and then come up with things like they do in terms of the budget that is responsive to council needs. This was a difficult budget, and they're going to continue to be difficult. And so I just really want to thank all of you for your inputs on this, and for the work that you do, not just on the budget, but every day. It is not an easy time to be a public servant, but you all do so very well, and I could not be more proud or honored to work alongside of all of you. So thank you very much. That's it.
Yeah, and I just wanted to also share with, I went to Clearwater Beach Association meeting last night, and our team, and I saw this, the first storm I've been through as mayor, but all of you worked so hard to make sure this city was safe and protected during the last storm, and did a lot of things to work as a team and your departments to make sure that our citizens' homes were protected from flooding in particular, reacted very quickly to some very, extraordinary circumstances, and spent a lot of time, spent the night sometimes in some neighborhoods, making sure things were on top of. And I can tell you that just the Clearwater Beach Association neighborhood last night, and I've gotten comments from so many citizens throughout Clearwater. So appreciative of your professional dedication and your commitment and to work those exhausting hours and deal with the stress of that storm coming through. And I share city managers and the city council, we share our deep appreciation for all of you, not just what you do every day, but certainly what you do in times of the storm, because it's noticed by our citizens, and we get some criticism from time to time. You've seen it at council meetings, but on different departments and things that don't go the way we want them to go. But by and large, I get great comments on our city staff from throughout the community. And I just want to let you know how much I and the council, we share that appreciation that the city manager just shared with you. Anything else?
That's it,
Yeah? Okay, item number 4.
Nothing at this time, Mayor.
Okay. With that, I will adjourn the work session of August 14, 2024.